Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Julia Nofrita. I'm the Director of Program and Development at the Habibie Center. And today, welcome to the public discussion forum on Reimagining Democracy, Revitalizing Representative Democracy in Indonesia and ASEAN. This public discussion forum is the collaborative works of the Habibie Center and the Institute for Democracy and Economics Affairs, IDEAS, and supported by the UK Mission to ASEAN. Ms. Sri Murniati Yusuf from IDEAS will moderate this session. To start, as the host, I will invite Dr. Muhammad Hassan Ansori, the Executive Director of the Habibie Center, to deliver his welcoming remarks. Mr. Ansori, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Habibie Center. First of all, I would like to thank, of course, to the UK Mission to ASEAN, without which this event would not be possible. And also on behalf of Habibie Center, I would like to thank to the IDEAS for this cooperation. Hopefully we'll continue in the foreseeable future with following joint activities, and I think. And I would like also to extend my sincere thanks to the our visiting guest, Professor Bertoa from the Nottingham University, and our competent and really well-known discussion today. And Mbak Titi, selamat datang, and Mbak Handisa, Mbak Titi from the University of Indonesia, the Faculty of Law, and Mbak Handisa from BRINT, the National Agency of Research and Innovation. So today I think we would like to have a really important and interesting discussion on the issue of the revitalizing representative democracy. Revitalizing representative democracy. Just a couple of things to say. We see that the world is getting less democratic. We see even many countries have reverted to authoritarianism, and more with the established ones, show the sign of deterioration of the quality of democracy. This is actually based, indicated by a couple of the survey, or like Freedom House, or the Economic Intelligence, and especially within this 15 years, after we actually witnessing the very dramatic expansion of democracy since 1974. So Huntington called it the third wave. But very unfortunately, within these 15 years, especially Indonesia, also we have experienced the declining and stagnating democracy. So many things, issues that have been, connected to our declining democracy, from the vote buying, for the corruption, from the populism, patronage politics, and this is to say that our tagline, the tagline of the Habibie Center was coined by our founding fathers. Democratization must go on. It's indicate that democracy is not a linear process. They're not simply moving from authoritarian to democracy, and this is what we believe at the Habibie Center, that democracy should not be taken for granted, and we need to fight with our highest determination. And this is the belief of President Habibie. And responding to our current situation of democracy in Indonesia, like last 2 years, we just established our Habibie Democracy Forum, and this is actually our concrete response to our situation of democracy in Indonesia. And this is a annual big event, and following by monthly, I think, research and a discussion of the issue. But mostly, under our Habibie Democracy Forum, we give more focus on national politics. So this is good today that we have, tried to see other part of the world cases, to see. And I think the best way to learn and to reflect ourselves is by learning from other cases of the world. And I believe, and we are lucky today, we have Professor Bertoa that have very extensive experience with the other part of the world and countries. And especially, and I see we would like to see from the comparative politics, and from there we would like to receive more perspective, perspective and insight from our situation at the Indonesia in the region and in the world. And one thing that I would like to also emphasize that democracy right now goes beyond the rule of law and the protection of human rights, but democracy also is important. The use of power with the control of the policy making. Especially right now, we have an issue after our president's Prabowo proposal, to stop our direct local election by appointment to the local council. And this is a big concern of our democracy in Indonesia, that more or less will bring about the effect of our future of democracy. And again, I hope today's event will be brought about some important insight, perspective on how the democracy in Indonesia and the region and all over the world. Thank you very much again for our esteemed guests, discussion moderator, and guests. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ansori. I would really repeat what he said, yeah, especially we must not take for granted our democracy today. And indeed, this public discussion forum reflects our efforts that democratization must go on. And for next, I'm gonna invite Ms. Rimurniati Yusuf to introduce briefly her organization, ideas, and of course, introduce our special guest here, and then starts the discussion. Ms. Murniati, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bu Julia. So I'm Sri Murniati Yusuf. I'm a Senior Research Director at the Institute for Democracy and Economic Affairs in Malaysia. I'm actually Indonesian, but I've been in Malaysia for quite some time and working in this organization. So I'm very happy to be here, to be back in Jakarta again. So just a little bit about ideas. It's established in 2010, basically to fill the gap in the public policy space in Malaysia for non-partisan think tank, because back then I think most of the think tanks in Malaysia are either, pro certain political parties or established by politicians. So I think we back then sort of provide space for non-partisan discussions on public policies. So in 15 years now we've expanded into different topics, but democratization, democracy and governance has been the cornerstone of our works. So we've been working on anti-corruption reform in Malaysia, public procurement reform, as well as I think recently we've been working with Dr. Bertoa on political financing reform in Malaysia, because we don't have the legislation to regulate political finance in the country. So that's ideas, but we also work on other topics, on trade and economics, especially on ASEAN. We also work on social policies. We have worked on healthcare reform, on education reform, and I think another part of the work is the biggest one as well as public finance. So we work on fiscal decentralization, fiscal responsibility issues, and larger public financial management in Malaysia. So I think that's a little bit on ideas. We're small organizations, about 22 people. Actually, for Malaysia, it's quite sizable for small NGOs. So, and I hope on this year, we want to, expand our work beyond Malaysia. Of course, we have some works on trade and economy on ASEAN, but I think one of the reasons for us to pursue this project as well as ASEAN expanded, integrated economically. We've been talking about making progress in terms of trade, economy. One of the things that I think has been missing in ASEAN conversations is about the politics, right? How do we make ASEAN progress economically, but also democratically? And I think I'm glad that Dr. Ansari provided earlier introductions on the overall objective of the discussion. And I think, but for me, of course, as an ASEAN in general, that's the point of us sitting here today, that as a region, we should not only develop economically, but also, you know, in terms of politics and institution, I think because that's also an important cornerstone, right, for economic progress. So I think today we're very lucky to have Dr. Fernando Casal Bertoa. He's an associate professor at the University of Nottingham, UK. He's also a member of a number of international bodies, OSCE and ODHR, which is one of the important institutions, I think, in Europe that provide advice on governments on how to improve their democratic institutions. We've been working with Dr. Casal Bertoa since 2022 on the issue of political financing, and we brought him here because we just had a political financing conference in Kuala Lumpur, and I thought, why don't we bring, you know, the expert to come here and discuss a broader democratization in ASEAN. So we will give Dr. Bertoa about 30 minutes presentation, and then after that I will invite Bu Titi. Thank you for coming, and I think everyone knows here who is Bu Titi is. He's a board member of the Perludem. Yes, and I'm glad. I think we benefited a lot, even from Malaysia. Reading of your findings, of your organization research papers has been very good. And of course, hopefully, you know, next year or maybe this year we can have some cooperation as well. So Bu Titi, and I think 10 minutes to respond later on. And then Mbak Khanisa from BRIN, previously LIPI, so Badan Riset dan Inovasi Nasional. So I think another 10 minutes for Bu Khanisa later on. And then after that, I will open up Q&A. And please, you know, you can always ask questions to our esteemed three panelists. So without further ado, I will invite Dr. Bertoa to deliver his presentation.
Okay, thank you. I will just, you know, stand a bit, if you don't mind. Good. So what I'm going to present here today a bit is the fruit of my research, looking at this issue of the crisis of representative democracy. You know, what are the consequences, the causes, and the potential remedies. You know, of course, my research will be based mostly on European countries because it's, you know, where I tend to do research. Although now I'm currently preparing a book on party systems in Asia that is under review with Cambridge University Press. But today I thought that, you know, it would be a good context, because if this is happening in, you know, consolidated all democracies, you know, imagine what is happening, you know, in other newer democracies, right? So democracy is clearly being challenged, right? So if we depart from a conceptualization of democracy that would have, you know, 5, you know, different elements. This comes from Wolfgang Merkel's understanding of embedded democracy, civil rights, horizontal responsibility, governing effective power, political rights, and of course, you know, free and fair elections, so electoral regime. We see that, you know, there have been different processes, you know, globalization, the 2008, you know, Great Recession, the migrants crisis, especially, you know, in Europe. You may know about, you know, the Syrian migrant crisis in 2015, 2016. Clearly has put into question, you know, these different elements. Even recently, you know, the idea of free and fair elections has also been challenged. You know, think of not only the United States, you know, the intervention, you know, of Russia during the 2016 presidential elections, but also, you know, United Kingdom, Brexit, you know, France, Romania. Romania just got cancelled, you know, the first time ever in Europe, presidential elections were cancelled because of, you know, Russian interference. So clearly, this idea of free and fair elections is also being challenged. And of course, if democracy is being challenged, this has led, you know, to anti-partisan feelings among the public. You know, these ideas that parties are not necessary anymore, that, you know, we need, you know, perhaps it's just experts. And this also was fueled, you know, by the pandemic. Think, you know, during the pandemic, I don't know how it was in Indonesia, but for example, in my country, in Spain, we didn't have the prime minister coming out and explain what was going on. We had the expert on, you know, viruses telling us every single day. People would watch, you know, his, you know, press conference, about, what was going on, what needed to be done, etc., etc. So people start to think, well, why do we need the prime minister if we have this guy who really knows better how to manage, the pandemic, right? So these, of course, fuel this idea that, political parties are not necessary. And if you think about it, or you look at the data, for example, this is data from the Eurobarometer when the United Kingdom was still part of the European Union. You can see that in the European Union, which has the the largest amount of consolidated democracies in the world, only around 17% of European citizens trust in political parties. Okay, 17%. If you think about it, and you think that parties are at the core of representative democracy, and they are not trusted, then we can see that we have a problem. And it's not that parties are not trusted. It's also that when you look at trust in different institutions, the army and the police, which are neither representative nor accountable, are trusted much more than other representative institutions. Not just parties. Look at where parliament stands, or government. These are essential institutions in a democracy, and still, the level of trust is lower than other non-accountable and non-representative institutions. Moreover, parties are considered to be the most corrupted, institutions in a country. This is data for 2013, Transparency International. I think that the results were so wrong that Transparency International decided never to run this survey again, because you set the country. So basically, in 51 of the 107 countries where they ran this question, the question was, which of the institutions in your country are considered to be most corrupt? Political parties were the most corrupt in United States, Canada, United Kingdom, France, Germany, Norway, Finland, Brazil, Argentina, Australia, India. Consolidated democracies. More corrupted than the judges, more corrupted than the doctors, more corrupted than the journalists, more corrupted than the teachers, more corrupted than the professors, more corrupted, than the police. The most corrupted institutions. Think what this means for the functioning of democracy, okay? And of course, this has led to an increase in the level of polarization, an increase in the level of support for anti-establishment parties, illiberal parties, populist parties, anti-systemic parties, call it as you wish, but clearly contrary to our understanding of liberal democracy. This is data from my latest monograph, published in collaboration with Scholte and Jedi in University Press 3 years ago. It has data all up to the beginning of the 20th century, looking at the percentage of votes for anti-political establishment parties, right? Well, never in the history of European democracy, so basically 120 years of democracy, people have voted more for parties that put into question representative democracy, to the point that 1/5 of the electorate, on average, vote for this type of parties. Okay? So, as you can imagine, this is extremely problematic. And this is something that is not the average. It's also something that you see even if you split, the sample into different regions. You see this, in the Western European most consolidated democracies, right? A clearly increase, over time. You see, exponential increase in the case of Southern Europe. As you know very well, Southern Europe was the region that was most affected by the Great Recession. Portugal and Greece have to intervene by the Troika. My country was almost intervened, but have to take a very harsh austerity, reforms. There is expansion, and of course, in Eastern Europe, and there is also an increase. And the question is this a menace for democracy? Because I'm sure that you have read, many op-eds in the New York Times, Washington Post, many, different places, BBC, that populism is a cancer for democracy. Okay, but the question is, because sometimes I wonder, is this true? As an academic, sometimes I said, well, I need to test it in order to believe it. Not that everything, not everything that you read on the internet is true, okay, guys? So, you have to really test it. Because, the idea is that, is this a cancer that can put into question our liberal democracies? And, it can lead, like it led during the interwar period in Europe, to the collapse of the democracy altogether. So with the use of my, data set that you can find is publicly available in whogoverns.eu, that looks at all European democracies since the 19th century, so basically since the nascent of modern democracy in France, Second Republic in 1848, with a colleague from the Autonomous University of Madrid, José Rama, we look into this issue of, how polarization, so how the support for anti-establishment parties affects the quality of democracy. I'm not going to explain, the sophisticated models, but for those who are not familiar of how to read this, basically you have the vertical line. If the horizontal line touches the vertical line, means that that factor is not important. If it touches, if it doesn't touches the vertical line, then it means that it's significant and therefore important. If it's to the left-hand side, has a negative effect. If it's to the right-hand side, has a positive effect. Okay, very simple. Anyone can understand this. So we run, different models, and we look at the effect of, as you see there under the red square, of support for anti-political establishment parties, and we control for different factors, economic development, the number of parties in the system, the level of electoral volatility, the disproportionality of the electoral system, the type of regime, being presidential, parliamentary, also the age of democracy. Well, the important thing that you have to notice is that in all the models, the level of support for anti-establishment parties has a negative and significant effect on the quality of democracy. What does it mean? It means that the higher the level of support for this type of anti-establishment parties, the lower the quality of democracy is in a country. And you can see it here. There is no difference, even if you look at consolidated democracies in the West or new democracies in the East, there is still a significant negative effect. And it doesn't even matter that you look at different, types of democracy: electoral democracy, liberal democracy, deliberative democracy, participatory democracy, egalitarian democracy. Having an electorate that chooses to vote for anti-establishment parties reduces the quality of democracy in a country. So clearly showing scientifically that populism, polarization, is a problem for democracy, okay? But the question is, well, if it's a menace for democracy, what is causing this menace? What is that causes the rising support for anti-establishment party? Why we saw that, there was a exponential increase in the level of support for these parties, right? And, when you look at the literature, there are different, schools of thought. Some say that, well, everything is about the economy, right? The famous Clinton's, is the economy stupid, right? Is this idea that, when people don't have in their pockets what they need to survive till the end of the day, they will listen to all those, political parties that offer, simple solutions to complex problems. Then you have those that, think that, well, perhaps it is parties themselves who have the problem. So mainstream parties. Why? Because, mainstream parties have stopped mobilizing, Mainstream parties, have stopped representing, have stopped fulfilling their traditional functions. There is a wider gap between, the electorate and political parties. In the old times, political parties would be, this, middle element in the change that goes, from, the representation of the citizens to policy making at the government level. Nowadays, political parties are not only representing the state, they are entrenched in the state, right? They have become, in what my former mentor, Ingrid Van Vissen, called public utilities. You see here, for example, this is a graph that looks at, the financial dependency of political parties from the state. In many countries, up to 80% of the finance of political parties comes from the state. And the question is, public finance is good, but too much public finance might be a problem. Why? Because, if you are financially dependent from the state, what is your incentive to go to the public and try to attract new members or try to earn new funding? they have also, auto-regulated. Nowadays you have regulations everywhere, which in essential is good, but the problem is that, when they auto-regulate in a way that they protect themselves, even sometimes, against the public, then you have what Ingrid Van Biesen said, this public utilization of political parties. And because, voters are not stupid, they go to alternatives. What are alternatives? The populist parties, which claim to really be representatives of the true people, okay, against these elites. Then you have, another school of thought, mostly in America, which is about, well, society has changed. We are not the same as we used to be, 40 years ago, right? So, therefore, the idea is that because the process of globalization has wiped away, the class cleavage that used to structure politics, and, the process of secularization has wiped away the religious cleavage, just to put two examples, there is a lot of, potentiality for new parties to come in and attract, important sectors of society, right? And this is where, the populists have their, open ground, okay? And then, of course, there is this last, most recent, theory, which is a bit different from the previous one. The previous one was about economic development. This was about the fact that, well, the 2008 crisis, has destroyed everything, There has been not only a financial economic crisis, but has also been a, cultural, social crisis, okay? That has changed, the world as we know it, and therefore has led to this opening of the electorate to this type of anti-liberal political parties. No? We also look at this issue, the causes. There are different models. I want you to look at, now that you know how to interpret this kind of, regression analysis. You see, economic development, measured according to GDP growth, does not have an impact on the support for anti-establishment parties, okay? What it has an impact is, the fragmentation and the volatility, which we interpret as the crisis of mainstream political parties and the changes in the electorate. Okay? We also, and you see it here, right? You see here clearly there is for every increase in the number of parties, there is an increase in support for anti-establishment parties, and the same for increasing the level of volatility. But what I want also to look at is the effect of the crisis, right? We compare, because my data set it looks at 167 years of European history, so it's able to compare, for example, the famous Great Depression, 1929, the effects, with the Great Recession. And you see that in the Great Depression, marked with the circles in red, there was no effect whatsoever. So it was not, of course, there were countries like in Germany where the Great Depression, led to the rise of Hitler. But, we are here trying to generalize findings, okay? We see that the Great Depression didn't have an effect on increasing the support for anti-establishment parties. But the Great Recession has, when interact with economic development, what does it mean? How we interpret this finding? Well, it is not that the Great Recession led to support for anti-establishment parties. It just was like the fuel to the fire. The crisis of parties was already before. The Great Recession only, increment or increase, this, negative effect of the crisis of political parties. You can see it here. These two graphs compare, for example, look at the graph on the left. Compare, the level of fragmentation before the Great Recession, which was already increasing, and the level of fragmentation after the Great Recession, okay? So clearly showing that the crisis of political parties was already before the Great Recession, only that after the Great Recession things became worse, okay? So, what is the conclusion that we get from these, findings? Well, the conclusion that we get from these findings, at least as I interpret them, is that support for anti-establishment parties per se is not the real problem. It's just the symptom, okay? Following the medical metaphor, right? It's the symptom of another sickness, the real sickness of democracy, which is the illness of political parties. So, because political parties, mainstream political parties are sick, because mainstream political parties do not fulfill their functions, voters are leaving them for other parties that are able, or at least promise, an alternative, to a representative democracy. As I mentioned before, there is also the issue of social change. We shouldn't forget that. But unfortunately, as an institutionalist, I cannot change society. It is what it is. I cannot stop you guys, from being on your phones, every day, right? But I can help to change institutions, and I can help to change political parties. So imagine that I'm a surgeon, or you are a surgeon. Why not? Let's put yourself in the place. You are political scientists all, and you are surgeons, okay? That you want to intervene the main sick actor in democracy, which is the political party. And let's continue with the cancer metaphor, okay? So we know that there are different treatments for cancer, okay? We have extirpation, okay? When you have a tumor, the populist party, you extirpate it. So basically, you ban it. But there is a problem with this solution. First of all, it is really right in a democracy to ban political parties. Morally, well, if democracy is about everybody has the possibility to give their opinion, if we ban a political party, well, doesn't look very right? Are they really democratic? The second thing is that, at least in Europe, there is a jurisprudence on this issue. The European Court of Human Rights says you cannot ban political parties except if there is no other alternative, which is very difficult to find, right? Because there is always an alternative, okay? Also because, banning parties is popular, to be fair, So there is this study by two colleagues of mine, Angela Burney and Shifra de Lef, that they found out that, people really love to ban parties, in Europe at least, okay? But there is a problem with this, You remember well, you don't remember because none of us were born at the time, but, you have read about it and you have watched, Al Capone movies. What was the problem with the prohibition? The problem was that at some point it had to end. The same happened with banning political parties, You might not be able to ban political parties eternally. So, in reality, the solution is only temporary. As you may have deduced from my presentation, I love history because I believe that nothing is new under the sun. Nil novum sum sole, that we used to say, right? The problems that we are facing today were faced long time ago as well, right? So we may find solutions in historical cases. For example, in Germany, after the Second World War, they decided to ban the Communist and the Neo-Nazi party. And Germany was a consolidated, successful democracy. Same with Finland in the 1930s with the Lapua movement. But there is no other country in Europe that has banned more political parties than the Turks. The Turks. The Turks have banned more than, 15 political parties between 1945 and 1990. And you know how things are in Erdogan's, paradise, right? Turkey is not a democracy anymore nowadays, in my country as well, we had a terrorist movement that has a political arm. We banned the political arm. It was called, Batasuna in the 2000s. Later, we lift the ban, and now they are supporting the government. So basically, they are in government nowadays. Spain has a government composed by communists, separatists, and, terrorists, basically, former terrorists. So you see, it does not work. Banning does not work. There are different reasons, but in practice, it does not work. The second solution for cancer is chemotherapy. What could be the chemotherapy of our, of our problem? Well, discrimination. The French call it cordon sanitaire, okay? The problems here is that, first of all, you need to discriminate parties over time. Just discriminate it in one election, it will not solve the problem. The second, you have to discriminate them at all levels, Because, one of the problems is that in many countries they discriminate at the national level, but then at the federal or the local level they don't. So at the end, it will, spill off in the, national level. The third problem is that, at the end of the day, what you are doing is, just simply giving, so basically saying, populists, you are right. You are outsiders. We are discriminating them. What the populists say, you see, these elites, these politicians, these corrupt politicians, they are not respecting us. They are not treating us equals. So what happens? We have the martyr effect. People vote for them because they say, oh, you see, they were right. They are being discriminated. They are saying the truth. Let's support them because they are the weak. We need to support the weak. We always love, the weak. We always want, the small team to win against the Real Madrid, Barcelona, or football, right? Because, they have so much money, the other don't have. Come on, they also have the right to win. So the same happens in politics. And for example, the cordon sanitaire was successful in the Czechoslovakia during the interwar period, so-called Pentka. 5 parties were always forming the government and discriminating the Nazis. There were a Nazi party in Czechoslovakia during the interwar period and the communists, okay? And Czechoslovakia, for example, was the only Eastern European country that didn't see the collapse of democracy until the invention of Hitler, of course, but it was an external factor. Or in Italy, in the First Republic, again, the neo-fascist movement on the right, the communists on the left, they were discriminated. The Christian democracy was always having governments, with the socialists, with the social democrats, with the liberals and the Republicans, So there was this cordon sanitaire that allowed, democracy to thrive. But for example, I don't know, you may have seen this woman, This is Marine Le Pen. She is the president of a radical right populist party in France. She has come second twice in the presidential elections, and the poll says that in the next presidential elections she may win the presidency, okay? Not only in the last, parliamentary elections, she was the first party. They didn't win the most seats because of the disproportional special, electoral system of France, but in terms of the percentage of votes, she was the most popular. So the cordon sanitaire, France created the cordon sanitaire. It didn't work. She is going to be in power soon, most probably, right? The Netherlands, again, the Flemish, Netherlands have been also subjected to the cordon sanitaire, in Belgium, last elections. They won the elections. So cordon sanitaire doesn't work, or at least doesn't work all the time. So we need another solution, We need, maybe a hormone therapy, okay? This is not the solution for cancer. What would be our hormone therapy? Well, it would be, what I call reconciliation. So this idea that if you can beat them, join them. In the United Kingdom, the Conservative Party decided to adopt, the positions of UKIP on Brexit. Well, you know what's happening in the United Kingdom, right? What can I tell you? I live there. And, in Spain, I just told you, the socialists are in government with the populists, the separatists, the terrorists, and, the communists. What is the quality of democracy in Spain? Right now, the Prime Minister is trying to take over, the judiciary, okay? So clearly, what's happening is interesting. What happened in the United Kingdom is that the Conservative Party moved to the right, and in Spain, the Socialist Party moved to the left. So instead of moderating the populists have radicalized the mainstream parties, increasing the level of polarization. So, clearly, this I already explained, 2 cases where it didn't work. In some countries, in Italy, for example, the neo-fascists initially were absorbed by Berlusconi, and in Ukraine, for example, the radical right was also included in the government, and it led to disappearance of these parties. But now, the radical right came back in Italy, Or, the interesting case of Poland, for example, Jarosław Kaczynski, he formed a government with the populists in 2005. The Law and Justice Party, it was a conservative party. In 2005, they went in coalition with the populists. It absorbed the populists, so the 2 populist parties disappeared, but they became the populists. You may have read about the problems of Poland, with the European Union. With the funds, for example, of the European Union were frozen because Poland, was considered to be an illiberal democracy. And they have taken over the constitutional core, they have taken over the media, etc., right? So you see that it does not work because at the end what happens is that, it is the good guys who radicalize, not the bad guys who become, good guys, okay? So what is the solution? Well, another, solution for cancer is the stem cell therapy, okay? Or what I call the diet of the political parties. So what I think is that, if mainstream political parties are the problem, then we need to treat them directly and they need to change their diet, their way of functioning. What do I mean by that? Well, just some examples. The first thing is that, political parties need to understand that they need to institutionalize. Institutionalize meaning having a strong organizations. One of the main problems that we are seeing nowadays in our democracies is that, parties are appearing and disappearing because they do not build strong organizations. They think that they can win elections with a tweet, which is true. The problem is that 4 years later, they are not in parliament anymore. In Slovenia, for example, in the last 5 elections, they have won by 4 parties. So 4 out of the 5 have won by parties that were created once, even 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. Those parties later disappear after 4 years. It's important that political parties have, because the organization allows you to have this direct contact with your members, with your constituency, with your supporters, I mean, democracy should not be about, the 15 days before the elections. It's about, this direct contact with the public, okay? They have to be, of course, more responsive, okay? It is important that, they get results. Political parties nowadays, they are not even thinking about the public. They are thinking about consolidating power. So nowadays, it's not even about ideology. It's about power for the sake of power. They have forgotten why political parties were, created for. They have to be, take responsibility and be responsible. One of the problems that we're seeing nowadays is that, if a populist party, promises the moon, the leader of the mainstream party comes and he promises Jupiter or, Saturn. It's just crazy, we come into this outbidding, electoral process. And of course, later they get into government and they get frustrated because they cannot deliver. And parties say, well, if we are going to get the copy, let's get the original. So if the mainstream party says that we are going to stop immigration, let's create a wall between Mexico and the United States. And then, of course, they cannot even build 2 kilometers of the wall. Well, then let's go for a different.
5 minutes?
Yes, very good. Transparency. One of the hobby horses of populism is, that mainstream parties are corrupt. So let's make them transparent. I mean, think about it. If we go for a coffee now and I don't have money and some of you invite me and then, ask me, to send him, a transfer. The bank will know when I send you the money back. You will know when I send you the money back. You know how much money I owe you, how much money I pay you. Don't tell me that political parties cannot do the same with donations, for example. They could put the donor, the amount of donation, when the donation took place, it was cash or it was in kind, immediately in their websites, if they really wanted to, And then they will stop this idea of parties as corrupt, elites that has given, in many countries, the populist parties power, okay? They need to lead by example. I mean, think about it during COVID, right? I don't know if you had this case in Indonesia, but we had it, for example, in the United Kingdom or in Spain, right? So I could not visit, my family basically next door, but the Minister of Health in the United Kingdom could have sex with his secretary, which was married to someone else. Well, imagine, what you think about the party. Not to talk about the famous, Boris Johnson parties in number 10, right? So I could not visit my mom, and, he was inviting everybody to have drinks. In Spain, for example, the same, you know. In Spain, exactly the same. So basically, we could not go out, but in parliament, there was a rule that established that, you know, they could not be two seats together. So even MPs have to leave one seat empty between themselves. When, you know, our prime minister came from Brussels because he got a lot of money from the European Union, all the government seats were completely. What, so much for social distance, right? So if the politicians don't respect their rules, why should respect them, you know? Long term, politicians nowadays, they don't even think about the next election. They think about, not even about the next polling, you know, they think all about the next tweet, about, you know, the next 5 minutes in the news, right? There is not an understanding that you need long-term, you know, policies for them, you know, to work. Sometimes, you know, you need to implement a reform nowadays that will take place, you know, in 8 or 10 years. But it's worthy. Politicians don't think like that. They have stopped thinking like that. You know, when the European Union was created, they knew that the effects would not be immediate, but they will take place, you know, in 30 or 40 years. And you see, we have peace, you know, so it was worthy. Then, you know, another important thing is the need for compromise. We need certain policies that need to be a compromise between the main parties. We cannot change, for example, you know, education every 4 years. So every time that a political party comes, change the long education. Spain is a clear example. We are at the queue in the last positions of the quality of education in the PISA report. Why? Because if you change the law of education every single time, then, you know, there is not an institutionalization of, you know, the education policies. Think of pension, think of immigration, another topic. There has to be a compromise on immigration between the main parties. It's not that, you know, when one party comes, we build a wall. When the other party comes, you know, everybody can enter. You know, this is crazy, right? And finally, you know, it is important that political parties do not have a zero-sum understanding of democracy. What we are seeing nowadays in many countries is that political parties, mainstream parties, come to power. This beautiful book by Larry Bartels that is called Democracy Erodes from Above. So you have mainstream parties that come in order to consolidate power, and they don't want alternation. Alternation is the essence of government. We like it or not. Of course, I have my ideological preference, and I always want my party to be, but I have to understand that sometimes we have to lose. I mean, I'm a Real Madrid supporter. The other day we lost with Barcelona. I mean, we have to lose at some point, right? So the same happens with politics. You know what I mean? But no, what we are seeing is this consolidation of power, which is wrong. Democracy is not a zero-sum game. Democracy is about alternation. The question is, when the other will be, he will respect you as much as you have to respect him when you will be in government. And this is the essence. And what we see in countries like Hungary, Serbia, you know, before in Poland, is the lack of respect for the opposition, okay? So, finishing.
Okay, this is really
Yes, finishing. The 5 stages of grief. Again, the cancer metaphor, right? The same happens with democracy. You know, we are sad, but, you know, we cannot deny that there are people that vote for populist parties, so we cannot ban them. We may be angry, but we shouldn't discriminate them, you know? We cannot bargain with them, because at the end what happens is that instead of us converting them, they convert us, you know? Now we are in this depressive, you know, kind of stage. We just need to accept them and be better than them, showing that we are better, that our policies are better, that, you know, that our parties is better. This is how you defeat populism, okay? So, I will stop the history lesson, you know, and I will just go till the end. So, conclusions, okay? Conclusions. Populism is a problem, okay? And populist parties are a symptom of a sickness, which is the sickness of traditional mainstream political parties, okay? But I do believe that even if parties are a problem, they are also the solution, you know? If not, I would not study political parties all my life, right? Like Bol the Builder, I think that, you know, if you are a proper leader, if you respect democracy, if you apply the diet to your political party, okay, you will be able to fix the problem of polarization and populism. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Fernando. I hope that I believe that opens up a lot of questions. I have some questions as well. Of course, maybe in our parts of the world, this so-called anti-political establishment party is not really present, maybe. But in terms of personalities, for example, I think that's one of the challenges to our democracy, the fact that people pander to leaders who are offering quick solutions on things, right? Offering the moon, and our lower trust on political parties. I think these are almost similar symptoms to what's happening in Europe. So I'm not gonna have a long speech, but I think we would love to hear the insights. I think I'm gonna invite Mbak Titi first and offering insights from Indonesia, and then later on from Khanisa on ASEAN in general. Mbak Titi, please.
Terima kasih Mbak Uni. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon everyone. My name is Siti Anggraini. I'm teaching election law at Faculty of Law University of Indonesia and also member of advisory board member of Perludem, Association for Election and Democracy, a national-based NGO in Indonesia. Thank you so much, Dr. Fernando, for your very insightful presentation. I learned a lot. I have some notes on the presentation, actually within Indonesian context. First, I think Indonesia shares a common phenomenon with democracy around the globe. Almost all global indices show a decline in Indonesian democratic performance. Let's say the Economist Intelligence Unit with 52 score put us as a flawed democracy country. And then the latest one put us as a electoral democracy, but we are in the same like a gray zone with electoral autocracy within, I think not 105, but 115 rank among 145 countries. So almost the lowest on corruption perception index. So that's why I sometimes said that Indonesia loves election, but is not consistent in implementing the value of democracy, because democracy needs anti-corruption, but corruption is one of the biggest problem in Indonesia. That's one first notes. And then, yes, that free and fair election are challenged. We have election, but they are not yet competitive. The elections still face many barriers to entry, high cost politics, candidacy buying, vote buying, massive political dynasties that weaken political party, and the hegemony of elites in decision making within political parties. What we call it as political recentralization. Even for executive local election, what we call it pilkada, the local office, the local political party needs approval from the national office to nominate candidates. So when we have decentralization, at the same time, meanwhile, we come to the era of political recentralization with the strong power of national office of political parties to control the local political parties. And then the phenomena of distrust on political parties, I think we have the same phenomena here in Indonesia, based on the survey data from many survey institutions show us that political party together with House of Representatives is the lowest institution that having trust from the public. And army and police now is in the top list of the institution that get trust from the public. What is the lesson learned? Also a red alarm for us. And then, yeah, I agree about the political parties that one of the biggest democratic problem in Indonesia during the Reformation is political party. We reform everything when the Reformasi, because I'm part of the Reformasi. I graduate from high school in 1997, so I part of the Reformasi masa reformasi at that time. We reform everything, but we forgot to reform political parties. Meanwhile, political party access all the power, all the public position. To be able to be nominated as president and vice president candidate, you must be nominated by political party. DPR, even to be selected as justice of the Constitutional Court, you must get approval from political party in parliament. But we forgot to reform political party. Political parties do not function as institutions that provide political education or conduct democratic political cadre development and recruitment. Parties are merely instruments to gain power, as all important position can only access through political parties. So yes, that political parties is our biggest homework right now. And I think one of problem we face within last 15 years, 10 years, starting from 2014, is the weakening of the opposition or checks and balances power. The executive co-optation of all political parties reduce the parliament function to check on the government. Parliament acts as a rubber stamp to executive policies. For example, the enactment of the Corruption Eradication Commission law that weakened the KPK, and also the enactment of mining law, and then the enactment of Cipta Kerja law, job creation law, that creates so many controversy and protests among the public. We have less meaningful participation during the law-making process in parliament because there's no check and balances in our parliament. Our parliament is like, rubber stamp for the executive policy. And then the other characteristic of democracy backsliding in Indonesia is involving the repeated attempts to politicize the judiciary or politicization of the judiciary. If lawmakers feel that the court challenged their power, so they repeatedly change the constitutional court law. Even in last election, 2024 presidential election, they did politicize the constitutional court to change the rule of the game in injury time. I also noted that in Indonesia we face high tension of criminalization or doxing of opposing political force or critical groups movements. That also faced by my friends in NGOs. The last example is when Indonesia Corruption Watch activists criticizing or commenting the finding of OCRP, his personal data get exposed by the someone who just using doxing to intimidate him. And also consistent effort to restrict and narrow citizen political rights still run until today on the grounds of being costly, messy, and tiring democracy. For example, like mentioned as Pak Director, the narrative to change the regional direct elections, the head and vice head of region to be selected by the parliament, because the democracy is costly, messy, and tiring. And also, I think I have two last notes. Yes, that we need diet of political parties. I strongly agree. So how we can do that? First, the public funding for political parties. More public funding for political party. This is all proposal that we mentioned since I think 15 years ago. Public funding or proposal for more state budgets to finance political parties have not been realized until today. At least 30% of the budget of the political party financed by the state. We only suggest 30%, but not come into realization until today. And the last one is how we do diet of political parties by rearranging concurrent election to have more functional political parties. Not like now. Presidential election, legislative election, and pilkada conducted in 1 year, in the same year. It won't make our political parties have more exercise. So what we need is to have national concurrent election and local concurrent election with 2 years different. National concurrent election to elect president, DPR, and DPD only for the national position, and then 2 years after that to have the local concurrent election to elect local parliament and region head and vice head. So at the same time. So the political party machine is always hot during the 5-year cycle because the party only come to the people during the electoral period. So make them come to us often. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you. Kanisa, please.
Thank you so much, Ibu Moderator. My name is Kanisa. I work in ASEAN Research Team in Research Center for Politics, BRIN, previously LIPI, since 2011. First of all, I would like to thank you to the Habibie Center for inviting me, and also Dr. Bertoa and Ibu Titi for the insight. I will not touch upon on the political party discussion, as that's not my highlight of the research, and my research is more on ASEAN dynamics. So I will explore the general discussion on democracy in the region. So from our research that we find that collectively there's a particular effort in making democracy as a regional norm, as it stated in ASEAN Charter actually, to strengthen democracy, enhance good governance, rule of law, and to promote and protect human rights and fundamental freedom, with due regards to rights and responsibility of the member states of ASEAN. I think however, we can see that this statement have a special terms and condition on highlighting how the democracy itself can be implemented, and the part that stated with due regard to the rights and responsibilities of the member states is such a double-sidedness on promoting but also limiting democracy in the region, and that's, as Dr. Luhulima said, it's referred as a gated democracy. That's actually not helping the democracy itself to be flourish in the region. So looking at this democracy norm promoted in the regional level, but it cannot also be separated from Indonesia's role, especially after the country experienced democratic revival of reformasi. Ever since the reformasi, from our research, that Indonesia has been manifesting democracy as one of its political foreign policy identities. But despite the challenge and the cases that still looms in domestically, as Ibu Titi said, actually the Indonesia projected democracy value in the regional and international level. So it's more like a very such a two world that cannot be connected when we said Indonesia have project democracy outside, but within the inside also we have the problem that we need to be fixed. So this can be seen on ASEAN level. This can be seen from Indonesia's effort to push substantial change in the form of proposing the concept of political development, and actually include democracy as a substantial point in the ASEAN Charter, and also other projection of democracy also can be found in Bali Democracy Forum, which become one of the prestigious democratic events under President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono presidency. So I think 20 years ago, democracy become such a highlight of Indonesia's foreign policy that brought brought to the outside to the foreign policy fora that ensure that the identity of Indonesia is is a democratic country, democratic ruler of ASEAN that leads ASEAN into democratic path without touching what is going on inside Indonesia itself. But lately, in the past decades, there's a shift of themes that carried by ASEAN. The norm of democracy as well as human rights, although existed, is no longer voiced as loud. And from our research, I think that turn is I think the turn into a more pragmatic organization is more right now is more to explore development and economic issues, and also when we explore strategic issues on security and other era, and the norm of democracy is not no longer discussed and left as is. We have ICHR, we have ASEAN Declaration of Human Rights and other, but we don't really see how it's implemented on the region, and it doesn't really highlights the importance of what is the meaning of having ICHR when we have a lot of problems within the region itself. But we know that in ASEAN we have non-interference. That's why the democracy in ASEAN feels like it's a label outside to show that the organization wants to be up to the universal code of having democracy within the region. So like it's a very non-implementative jargon. And also I think the reason of this lack of intention of ASEAN member states to restate commitment of democracy, as well as that it have something to do with the trend of regression of democracy that have been stated also by Dr. Bertoa and also Ibu Titi, that also happens within Southeast Asia. And I think regarding this regression, it's not only about Myanmar coup, although it symbolize that there's decreasing of democracy, but I think decreasing of democracy is happening all over Southeast Asia. But as the discussion within ASEAN itself is not putting it on the highlight, so the country is less likely to be open of what is the problem and what can we work on that. Because in ASEAN again we have the non-interference, and domestic issues is domestic issues, and it's always become the shield when people wants to talk about it. And there is also the problem of pressure in freedom of speech. And I think the other thing is the less I mean like the less interested public on issues of democracy in other states. I mean like we also have problems in our state. So I mean like when we have the discussion on regional level, it doesn't bring up to the level that all the states wants to talk about. And in this situation, then what it is to be done? I think there's two things that needed. First, the rise of a member state that can project the need to re-highlight the democratic norm in the region, that is willing to open more discussion and democratic issues, and also rising people representation on the region. The second is the member state that must be able to ensure other member states about the benefit of upholding and implementing democracy in the region. Because I think many regime that doesn't really implement democracy because they doesn't really see what's the benefit inside of it. So I mean like when we see Vietnam right now with the flourishing economy, maybe the people of Vietnam said like, okay, we don't have a freer voice, but we have a more better economy. I mean, like, there's also the discussion about what's to be done about that, and who's the member states is, I think it's still open to discussion, because I think Indonesia itself is struggling on reworking on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have many requests. Please applaud for our three panelists. So I think we can open up a discussion, but I think I'm just offering a little bit insights on Malaysia. I would say, after listening to you, Dr. Bertoa, I think Malaysia probably could be that one state that should be projected its democratic norm, because it is actually at that point at this moment, right? Malaysia has experienced for the first time a transition in terms of who in the power for the first time since 50 years since our independence. So it's a long it's a new thing, right? And of course, it's an opposition leader in the past, Anwar Ibrahim. So it has that opportunity to project democratic norms. So I hope really the government use that opportunity to really project that. And I think no talk, you know, considering the discussions on the EPIP, actually in Malaysia, in a way, have a better party institutionalization, because the party is actually working. But the message, unfortunately, has always been a populist message. So yes, it doesn't have the problem like what's happening in Indonesia or in other countries, but we're also facing a similar populist problem, even though we have a quite institutionalized party system. So I will open, I think, I hope a lot of discussion, a lot of questions. So, okay. Oh yeah, oh sorry, sir, okay. And then this side, any other questions? So, okay, so let me take two questions first, and if you want to ask question in Bahasa Indonesia, please, and someone will be able to translate.
Okay, thank you. My name is Rio. I'm an independent scholar. So I want to ask about political parties. So in Indonesia, sometimes there's a disparity between the representatives in the local government in DPRD and in DPR. So why political parties is still popular in Indonesia, even though maybe the trust is low? It's because I think because most of the people is mainly engaged by their local governments, by their local representative in the DPRD level, but not in the DPR level, in the national level. I don't know about UK because the national and local government system, I don't want to touch it in 10-meter pole, but I think that's what I can observe, that there is why political parties both still matters, but also problematic with the because the disparity between the local representative and the national representative. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Angeline Alban. But Titi, I have a question for you, but maybe to have it deliberated with Mbak Anissa and also Prof. Bertoa. Now that the presidential threshold has already been removed, thanks to also Mbak Titi's efforts, what are the next low-hanging fruit that we should be focusing on, especially on the party, on the political party regeneration? Because since public funding is not within the current government's appetite, what could be done next? Thank you.
I think I will start with the second question about the elimination of presidential nomination threshold. Yeah, yes, it was a good news for us within all the circumstances. Yeah, with the hope that in 2019 we will have many candidates, and we can focus on more ideas politics programmatic politics compared to like populism or polarization 24 with the peringatan darurat won't happen again during the revision of the election law. In my opinion, to have prospective candidates in 2029, don't make new requirements to for political parties to run in election, because the gatekeeper to be able to nominate candidates is only for the political parties that also the political party that run in election, partai politik peserta pemilu. I read the strong tendency to to make the requirements for political party harder than before. You know that the requirements to contest in election for the political parties is one of the most expensive requirement in the world, yeah, in Indonesia, because the political party must have office and official in all provinces. We have 38 provinces. It means they must have office in 34 provinces, and they must have office in 75% of kabupaten kota, and also 50% office and official in kecamatan, 50% kecamatan. Not only that, they must have members, party members, minimum 1,000 party members in 75% kabupaten kota. It's so hard to fulfill the requirement. So I think what we have to monitor is I hope the parliament, the lawmakers don't have additional requirements for political parties to contest in election. That's the first concern. And the second concern, when the nomination of political party must the nomination of president and vice president must through political party, it means we must have credible election organizers, KPU and Bawaslu, because the KPU, the institution, the only institution who will verify the eligibility of political party to running in election. Can you imagine if the KPU fragile of corruption and manipulation and can intimidate by money or power to have favority on political parties, yeah. So I think we have to ensure that we have a good and credible election organizers to manage the verification of political party. And also Mbak, for the recruitment and caderization, to avoid the the oligarch and the strong person that only seeking for power, yeah. We need political party to implement the preliminary election within political party to be able to nominate candidate. The preliminary election maybe not involving all the members, because it will very costly, yeah, to have election within political parties that involving all the members, but at least to have like musyawarah mufakat among the party officials with the bottom-up process. So by have yes, like primary, but in Indonesia we usually use the term of preliminary election. Yeah, maybe like musyawarah mufakat involving the official of the political party with the bottom-up process, ya Mbak, ya. So the nomination not only decided by the ketua umum as usual, ya, with closed door process. Yeah, but sometimes what make me feel like, ya gimana ya, all the things decided by the lawmakers, ya. And sometimes the lawmakers with the political parties inside, they don't want to have new competitors, and they don't want to bring the reform, fully reform to regulate political party. So that's one of the obstacle of us in Indonesia, Pak Bertoa, that the political party not willing to reform their institution, yeah, by having more democratic regulation. So that's why people like me sometimes went to constitutional court to promote better regulation on political parties and election. But I realize that that's not always a solution, because it can weaken the democratic institution. It can weaken the political party's function by having too much involvement of constitutional court. Yeah, I think that my response, Mbak. Makasih. Oh yeah, yeah. About the disparity, yeah. Oh yeah. The disparity between the local and national political party. I think we have different regulation, yeah, on local and national. First, we have parliamentary threshold for national political party to have seats in parliament. For DPR, yeah, 4%. So that's limit the political party that can get seats in parliament. Now we only have 8 political parties in DPR. But we don't have parliamentary threshold for the DPRD. So that's make the political parties more, diverse in DPRD and can engage closer to the people. But for DPR, we only have 8 political parties. In DPRD, in some DPRD, we have more than 10 or even more than 12 political parties. So parliamentary threshold, I think, also limit the relation between political parties at the national level and the voters, ya. Itu salah satunya. So I support the idea to eliminate the parliamentary threshold for national parliament, but and then to make the to reduce the fragmentation in parliament in DPR, we can implement the fractional threshold. So not parliamentary threshold, but fractional threshold. It's okay to have seats in parliament, but it doesn't mean you can form a fraksi. Yeah. So if you want to form a fraksi, you must have seats minimum numbers equal to the numbers of the committee. So for example, now we have 13 commission at DPR. So if you want to form a fraksi, because the relation between president and parliament bridging by the fraksi, you must have seats minimum 13 seats. So I think by having more political parties, it also will increase the inclusiveness, the inclusivity of the party and the party. Yeah.
Thank you, Mbak Titi. I think Fernando, probably you can answer the questions, and also I think I would love to hear your view on some of the points that's raised by Mbak Titi as well, please.
We agree on many things, but but there are two things where I don't. Well, let me try to organize a bit. You know, by the way, you know, if Indonesia was part of the OSCE, these crazy requirements to create a party would be completely, you know, trashed down. You know, I mean, there is not even one European country that has these requirements. You know, most of them are Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan. They are still OSCE and they are criticized, but you know, they are not democracies, right? So having those countries would be considered not very, those requirements not very democratic, right? Because, you know, there should be freedom to form, the freedom of association requires that you have the freedom to form a political party. You know, of course you have to have some requirements, but they have to be reasonable, and these are completely unreasonable. I agree with you, you know. Couple of things. I don't think that, you know, eliminating the electoral threshold is a good idea. 8 parties is already a lot. You know, it's already a lot of parties. So if you eliminate the electoral threshold, you will have even more parties, you know. And, you know, fragmentation has been, as you could see, seen to lead to higher level of polarization, low level of party system instability, you know, many problems. So you already are fragmented enough, I would say. What is important is that, you know, political parties are able to compete. If they don't manage to get a certain threshold, well, you know, it's their fault, not, you know. So this is one thing. The other thing I would like to say is that I disagree with you. So first of all, I think that presidential elections, the direct election of the president, is bad. Not only I think this, I published an article this, well, not this year, just 1 year ago in the British Journal of Political Science that shows that, you know, countries with direct presidential elections tend to have unstable party systems. Not only, I'm writing this book that I mentioned before on Asia, where we find out that in Asia, those countries with direct presidential elections have low level of stability of the party system. So maybe we cannot eliminate the presidential election in Indonesia, but by reducing the threshold for presenting candidates, what you are doing is you are giving the opportunity to small parties with populist leaders to be able to present their candidates and get elected. So by keeping the candidate selection, I understand that it may be considered to be less democratic, but it's better in terms of the stability of the party system. Because, you know, these are parties that are interested, you know, in the institutionalization of the system. You know, because as you are saying, they are the big parties, they are not interested in getting anyone new. They are not interested in moving the political scene, so they continue over time, right? So I think, you know, contrary to you, I think this is bad news. But I think the problem, there is a original sin, and the problem is presidentialism. As you know, you were not a presidential country. 1999, it was parliamentarism. The president was elected by the parliament. You know, it was everything changed in 2004. I agree with you, for example, on this concurrency. I think that, you know, the election should not be concurrent, which, you know, it was only changed 2 elections ago. Before 2004, 2009, the elections were not concurrent. Okay, so it was a better system, a better system then. What should be next? It was asked. I think it's oversight. There is a problem with, you know, oversight, and oversight clearly should be next. This does not mean that, you know, I think that, you know, the proposal that, you know, she was mentioning about the public funding, at least 30%, would be, you know, excellent, you know, solution for a lot of the problems that, you know, political parties are having in you know, in Indonesia.
Oversight, can you explore?
I mean, yes. I mean, what I mean is, you know, oversight of political party finance. I mean, at the end of the day, public funding is not a panacea. You may have public finance, right? But if for example, parties are not controlled, what they are using their public funds for, you know? What are they using the taxes for? You know, if there is not a control from oversight authorities, you know, be it the Electoral Commission, the Court of Auditors, whatever, you know, it's a matter of discussion, you know, then public funding is wrong, you know, because it is not being controlled. Or if you give public funding to political parties, and on top of that, they are able to get donations from corporations, you know, or, you know, from oligarchs, and you don't control that, well, you are even giving more fuel to the fire of corruption, right? So oversight is essential. Without oversight, you know, public funding will not work, you know, for example, you know. So this is very important.
Thank you. I think as Indonesians, I have some resentment to political parties. But at the same time, we know the importance of this institution. So I think I would love to hear your views as well. So feel free to even comments, right? I mean, we are in, oh, please. I would ask Mbak Kanisa later on the possibility of bringing the discussion at the ASEAN level, but I will take questions first from the floor. Please, Ibu. 1, 2, 3, more questions now. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. My name is Tanti Tamrin. Most of my work is actually in the security, so I work a lot with the police and the military. In the last 8 years, I think the political parties already destroyed the merit system in the police and the military. Why I can say that? Because what we have now, it's actually the leader, most of the leader in the police and in the military, it's actually they're younger than actually the system that, for example, we have that left in the cohort in 1991. It's actually they still have a lot of time before the retirement. So you can imagine after this person, it's become the head of the army or the head of the police, and then he's still not in the retirement process, and the government will take him to the civilian position. That is actually endangers for the democracy. So there is a lot of saying actually internally that the what you call it, there is a blue blood, you know, the system that actually destroy the merit system. If you don't have the even though you have the very good standard level, but if you don't have a connection with the political party, you cannot reach that position. This actually destroy this last 8 years, yeah. That's destroy the merit system that already established in our police and the military. So I hope, I don't know if the BRIN or the have the research on that, but for the person who work in the security, this is really concern for us. Thank you.
Thank you. That's really good questions. They have problem like that in Europe. So, please, yeah, Bapak, silakan.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Rasidi Bakri. So yeah, as Dr. Fernando mentioned about something that nothing new under the sun. Yeah, I remember Polybius cycle rule, where he said that actually what's happening, that we live under democratic system, and then the next time we will live under the authoritarian or regime, and then it's sort of working like a circle. So somehow I think that's happening right now when we see the people like Trump, or the one that you put at the same Prem in your last presentation. Yeah, I don't know whether you believe it or not, but do you think that our society is kind of doesn't know how to move forward, but otherwise back what is it, backward, setback. And then since Mbak Titi mentioning about Bawaslu, I'm actually working for Bawaslu in one of the province, precisely in the central Sulawesi. I myself, I think that what's the problem of the political party in Indonesia is that the political party here, it seems like they don't have sort of some ideological orientation. I think we have to back to the let's say classic ideology, where the party sort of have class struggle orientation. Because here in Indonesia there are so many political party. They are claiming that they are struggle for the laborer, for the peasant, etc. But at the same time, where the what is it, omnibus law is coming, all of them are agree. So who is struggling for the labor? Yeah, that's the problem. We don't have political party doesn't have relation directly to the social class, social group in the society. Yeah, I think that's we will still
Let me
think
collect
about.
some questions. I think I see the
Thanks.
so there's 1, 2, the third. I think four first, yeah, because I think I will let the panels to answer. Mbak, yes, Mbak yang belakang. Ya, minta maaf. Ya.
Halo semuanya. Hi everyone. Thank you for your insights, and Fernando, gracias por la presentación. My name's Irma Nugra. Sama-sama. My name is Irma Nugranti from International Institute for Social Studies. I'm also a researcher. So when we talk about this, is very interesting because I mean democracy is quite complicated, but I think when we talk about ideal democracy, people talk about protecting human rights and fundamental freedom, as you said, unfortunately, I think democracy is also socially constructed. What you consider as valuable or universal human rights, sometimes in different countries, it has different definition, right? So there's no size fits all, and I think that's very challenging. Now, reimagining democracy, you talk about different issues in our democracy, such as corruption, political dynasty. I think some of them roots in the issue of power imbalance. And now, when we talk about reimagining democracy, and one of the most important aspect is also finance, as Fernando said earlier. Now, I want to ask, when we talk about political finance, sometimes the finance is not inclusive. What is prioritized in that financing only benefited certain gender or certain class or certain race. So I want to put one of the most important aspects in this democracy, which is gender lens. So please enlighten us. What do you think the best institutional mechanism to mitigate power imbalance and promote gender lens, so we could have inclusive democracy, we could have equal benefit and have agency in our country? Thank you.
Thank you. The last one from this side. I believe there's someone raising hand from this side. Yeah, please. Yeah, Mbak. Yeah, yang pakai kacamata.
Hi, I'm Gemma. I'm an IR graduate. So my question is related to political parties not having ideology. Implementing it in Indonesia, there's also an aspect of political personalization where actually we're talking about democracy in Indonesia. I think in many countries actually we have to recognize the fact that not all voters are conscious voters that associate themselves with certain values and wish for certain values to be pursued in the parliament. Sometimes they associate themselves mostly with a certain a person, and even if that person switch from one value to another, they follow that. Yeah, so not having the voters themselves might not even realize their own ideology and the agenda they wish to pursue. So how does that aspect sort of considering that aspect, how would that affect the conclusion of the presentation previously? That's my question.
That's really good questions. I think, yeah, party ideologizations of parties are possible at all, especially in Indonesia's context. But I think I will first ask Mbak Titi, and on the unfortunately negative implications of public appointments through political parties, right? Please.
I think we have all the proposals on the table. Yeah, the only problem is the goodwill and strong commitment from the elite or lawmakers to do the full reform. That's the only problem. We learned from 1999. We changed the election system, started in 2004. And then we have most open proportional open list system in 2009, but through the Constitutional Court. We have all the institution. We have 3 chambers of the check and balances power, executive, legislative, and judiciary, but minus effectivity. Because we always have the loophole in our laws to implement all the laws and regulation effectively. So for instance, like on the women representation, in last election, even the actors that destroying the schema of quota is election commission by implementing the technical regulation that against the quota regulation in the law, in election law. So in our election law, it's mandatory for the legislative candidate list to have minimum 30% of female candidates. But and then you introduce the new regulation that reduce the presentation. Usually we have like what we have met 4 formula pembulatan ke atas. So for example, when you have 4 candidates in the district, it means you must have 2 female candidates. That was practices since 2014. But and then the election commission, because they pressure by the parliament, and then they introduce the KPU regulation that against the articles in the law. So what is the impact? The impact is more than 200 electorates or electoral district in DPR election doesn't meet the requirement of minimum 30% of female candidates. So that's why when one political party bring the case to Constitutional Court, and then Constitutional Court gave ruling to do the re-election in one district in Gorontalo. So I mean, even we are not finished yet with the commitment to have gender mainstreaming policies. Even the institution who against the commitment of gender mainstreaming policies is state actor. I cannot, even until today, I cannot believe that KPU as democratic institution even weaken the policy to have a more inclusive election by having quota policy in candidacy list, in candidate list. So I still believe that one of the point to have more inclusive and more female leaders is by having quota, by having quota policy. Because we are still facing social and cultural barriers, and still facing discrimination against among our society. So we need more inclusive policy, and I think one of the most proper policy is by having the quota policy. Now the quota policy for female representation only apply in legislative DPR and DPRD election, not yet in DPD and executive election. When we advocate the election law in 2016, we propose a formula to reduce the the requirements to nominate independent candidates in pilkada, ya. For example, if the independent candidates must require 5 votes, 5 support from the voters, we can decrease the support 30%, something like that.
Thanks, Mbak Titi. I think
I will stop there. Yeah, I think the quota policy is one of the strategy, and then the second one is about the political finance budget that allocated for the women regeneration in political parties. Now we have 100,000 rupiah per valid votes from the state. So state will pay 100,000 rupiah per valid votes that gained by the political party. So yeah, jadi if they get one valid votes, the valid votes will pay 1,000 rupiah from the government. But there's no specific allocation for women empowerment, political women empowerment in political parties. So we need more schema, ya, to put the more budget to strengthen women in politics. And the last one is, I think we still have hopes among all the obstacles and challenges. Yeah, what is our future hopes? I think Gen Z. Don't forget the breakthrough, the landmark decision putusan MK nomor 62 come from Gen Z who really cares of their democracy and fairness in election. So what we can do is by having more Gen Z, more reform academics, and more reform activists to do collaboration in safeguarding our election through the advocacy in parliament, through the petition in constitutional court, and doing digital activism to educate public on election and democracy and politics. Yeah.
Thanks, Mbak Titi. I will give Fernando a chance first, I think, to answer several important questions on public appointments, especially police, and the fact that the appointments through political parties have been actually a lot of questions, but yeah, please.
Okay, so very quickly, appointments. Well, it's what we call patronage. Okay, the problem of patronage that you see nowadays, in many countries. As I always say, no country is unique. So in Spain, the president of the Constitutional Court was a former public prosecutor of the government party. The president of the post office was a fellow friend of the prime minister. The president of the state survey company, was a former member of the government party. And I could continue the train company, the airport company, all friends and former members of the prime minister. And that's why, we see this state capture, in many countries, in new democracies, countries like, Georgia, other new democracies, but also, in consolidated democracies. And this is also in many countries because of, in this book that I'm writing on Asia, in the last chapter, we look at the effects of the stability of the party system for accountability, And we clearly find that, when the party system is not stable, right, the level of accountability is very low, and therefore, this is why what is happening with this. What you need, is proper, regulated, appointment and procurement, procedures that allow for, not these things that you are mentioning to happen, and of course, independence of the judiciary, because if the procurement laws, for example, or the appointment laws are not properly implemented, then you can always go to the courts that will go against the government, right? So I think that this is also part of these low levels of institutionalization that you are seeing, the personalization of politics, right? When political parties are institutionalized, they have what is called value infusion. What does it mean? It means, and this is connected with the issue of the ideologization, you are connected to the party. It's a bit like, you are connected to God. It's this kind of, sentimental relationship. The party is infused with value, because they identify with the political party, and because they identify with the political party, and this is when, political parties are institutionalized. If there is no institutionalization of the political party, that's why institutionalization of political party is so important for the regeneration, of democracy, as I was talking in my presentation. The phenomenon that you are saying, is what, academics we call the cartelization of politics. Parties behave like a cartel, right? And this is really, really problematic. Because, Richard Katz and Peter Mayer, who was my supervisor and co-author, came with this idea of the cartelization of politics, where political parties come to the middle of the political spectrum. And this is exactly what leads to the appearance of populist parties. Because, the streams of the political spectrum are empty and allow, there are, I wouldn't say crazy people, but radical people, let's put it this way. There are radical people everywhere. And they will look for a representation. If the moderate parties stop representing them, this happened, for example, in my country, in Spain. The Conservative Party was going from the center to the extreme right. But by bringing everybody in, it allowed, to moderate, these extreme ideas. When the Conservative Party leadership decided to leave the, conservatives, Christian Democrats, and everybody else to go to somewhere else, of course, these people didn't feel represented, and a radical new radical right party that had never existed in Spain since democratization appeared. Why? Because of the emptiness of that spectrum, right? And this, of course, is problematic. And finally, regarding the finance, well, in this, it was already mentioned, you can use public funding for promoting the participation of women in politics. For example, you could earmark part of the public funding. So, for example, 2% of the funds that political party receive, they have to obligatorily, and that's why also oversight comes in, because oversight, the oversight authority needs to check that this is implemented, for the promotion of women in politics. You could impose sanctions. For example, in Portugal, going back to the quotas, if a political party doesn't respect the quotas, they are wipeout of the whole public funding, which in a place like Portugal, where 60% of the or 65% of the money of the parties come from the state, means your death. So you have to respect the quota. So you see, public funding could certainly help, to promote the participation of women in politics, if properly used.
Thanks, Fernando. We have only 7 minutes. Unfortunately, I don't know whether the organizer can extend to 4:10. Can we extend to 4:10? 10 after 4. Oh, okay, great. So we have about half an hour now to continue the discussions. I have 2 questions from someone, because we also, this is online, so there are 2 questions from YouTube. One really good one actually for you. In the past, we can rely on one country to project democratic norms in ASEAN, where there's US as a, as a hegemon that actually say we are pro-democratic rights. But at the moment, that global leadership of democracy seems to be dwindling down somewhere. Is it possible to even have that kind of, that one country in ASEAN can actually do it? So is it possible at all with global norm actually it's not incentivizing the state to do that? So I think that's question. Another question, great one from the same person, is how are we incentivizing party leaders to think long-term goals instead of just short-term goals? The one that you said, one of the regeneration recipe is that. But how to incentivize, these leaders to think that way? Let the 2 speakers answer, and please raise your hand so I can choose. All right, only one person. That's great. Or 2, 1, 2. Okay, only 2. Unfortunately, we can't have any more questions, but feel free to reach out, and you can get the contact later. But let me get Kanisa to answer.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, that's why I left the part blank about who's the country, because if I put a particular name, it means that I'm rooting for one of the country, and I don't believe that Indonesia can do it again. I don't want to make make negative notes that Indonesia cannot do it again, but it's a hard job. But one thing for sure, I think there's a difference. There's a difference in implementing democracy and projecting democracy. And what Indonesia have been doing in several decades ago is projecting the democracy and fanning it to the region, so they believe it's something to be upheld. Not all the states agree, I suppose, with the statement itself saying there's a terms and condition, and also like the gated democracy that Professor Dr. Luhulima said, that ASEAN have this 2-sided of saying we're promoting it, but in your own terms. But I agree with you. It's safe to say, I think it's Malaysia's turn to to be have this seat, and also it's the this year, right? And also actually like this year there's a confusion about who's going to take the Myanmar issue with a firm hand. And as one of the pioneer of ASEAN, I mean like Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore, and the Philippines, as Malaysia is now on the in a chairmanship, I think it's a very very good opportunity to fan the flame again, to the whether the 5-point consensus can be done and everything like that. And also I think with the military said that the election will be this year, 2025, it's the right time to push the promise of this one country to uphold the democracy once again, although it might be only on whether it's debatable election. But I think it will be a very good symbolism, and I think that kind of symbolism is what it needs, because once again democracy and foreign policy is about symbolism. It's not actually about the implementation itself. And the second one, what I think about is whether actually there's a question about the low-hanging fruits of democracy. I think in ASEAN level, I think we need to agree that ASEAN is still an elite organization, but when ASEAN said like they want to be a people-centered and people-oriented, I think we have to use that and maximize that. You know, like because the door is there, so the civil society needs to be also actively use that. And like we sometimes get tired about ASEAN will not hear us, it's an elite organization, but I think in some cases changes happen. And I think one of the example that changes happen is in Indonesia's chairmanship 2 years ago. There's I think 3 consensus about having the protection of migrant worker at sea, and that's what the civil society in that issue has been fighting about. I think so. That's like it's there's a door to unlock this regional commitment, and so like the civil society needs to use that door, and if I might say, the word is abuse that door as good as we can.
Thanks. Thank you
very
so much. Fernando, on the long term and short term. Yeah. So that's a tough question.
Well, yes, this is the 1 million question, well, I think that, what we need is to show that it pays off. So what I'm trying to say is that, when you do not adopt, the reforms, when you don't have this long-term vision, at the end of the day, your political party suffers electorally, and in many cases, it even disappears. Think of, for example, I don't know, in Greeks, PASOK at the time of the crisis, right? They didn't adopt, the reforms that they have to adopt, and now PASOK, is I wouldn't say, a minor party, but, it may be very difficult that they come back to power. And PASOK was one of the, main socialist political parties in Europe. For example, in Portugal, they adopted a different strategy. They adopted the Troika. They didn't have a choice, but at least they adopted voluntarily, in the sense that, they accepted, they didn't rebel against it, the impositions of the Troika for the crisis. And, later, the Socialist Party and the Conservative Party, they thrive, right? So the question is, also it's about the legacy. How do you want to be perceived in the future, right? If you there is nothing worse, for a political leader. I always say, there is nothing worse for a political leader to destroy his own party, right? And I think that it is important to show this. On top of course, and perhaps this is more idealist, what Max Weber was talking about, politics as a vocation. This is something that we are seeing nowadays. We don't have politicians that have this vocation. It's simply power for the sake of power. And in my view, this is the main problem, right? So I think that it's a bit of the question of democracy. Why do we want democracy? Why democracy? What you were mentioning? Yeah. I was talking about. Looking at you. So I mean, because we need to show that living in a democracy is much better than not living another democracy. It's a bit like with the COVID. Do you remember everybody was crazy about China? Oh, these are so cool. They can put 10 million sickness in one hospital. Wow, they are great. Well, in reality, we know that they were not so great, and they recovered much later, from, the pandemic than many other democratic countries. On top of that, they suffer, more repression than, in other non-democratic countries, right? So I think that this is important that we take into consideration.
Okay, so the 2 questions, please, and then we can have the answers and we can wrap up.
Thank you. Tessa from the Embassy of Switzerland. I keep it short. What do you make of the rise of female leaders who are at the top of conservative movements and parties? So just to throw in some names, Alice Weidel, Angela Merkel, and Giorgia Meloni. Are these single events, or is it a trend? And if you see a trend, do you also see a paradox?
Thank you. My name is Azilbi Marajasa, undergraduate student of Faculty of Political and Social Sciences. My question would be, what is the major causes that the symptoms of the let's say the ugliness of the political party started? Is it a systematical problem which stems from like the previous decades, like in the mid 20th century, or is it just a very new 21st century problem? Thank you.
Okay, I think I didn't get the first question, because what is the issue there? I mean, yes, there are more female leaders, which is good news, I think, you know. But I didn't understand your question. What can you? Yes. What? Why you understand? What is that you are after? You know. I think you need the microphone so the people online can hear you. Yes. I can hear you, but the people online no.
I just wonder if you see a paradox to see a leader of a party who is a woman at the top of a party who actually advocates for a traditional gender role, where women actually are not, do not really play a major role in the public space.
Well, you know, I mean, I think that I would adopt here Adam Przeworski, you know, later attitude towards, you know, democracy, in the sense that, you know, as long as the rules of the game are being, you know, respected, you know, their opinion of certain values, you know, it should be, you know, also respected. So the basic idea that I want to say about him is, you know, about this is that the fact that, you know, there are, you know, women at the head of political parties that, you know, very, very conservative, I don't see that there is a problem with it, you know. I think that, you know, there are women who have, you know, more conservative ideas, and there are women who have, you know, more liberal ideas. What I think that is the problem also is that, unfortunately, because of the, you know, let's say, culture that we have, you know, more conservative culture that we see, you know, women are more under scrutiny than men. So if you see a bad female leader, you know, everybody will point at her. If you see a bad a bad male, you know, leader, nobody will notice. So it's like, you know, if we were requiring from women leaders, you know, more qualities than we require from men. And, you know, I think, for example, the case of the United Kingdom, you know, with Liz Truss, right? So, I mean, nobody wanted to have another, you know, female, you know, leader of the Conservative Party, because, you know, I mean, it was really a disaster. But, I mean, if you compare Liz Truss, you know, didn't have much, let's put it this way, the legacy that Liz Truss get was because of a man that was coming before her, you know what I mean? So, I mean, the problem perhaps was not Liz Truss, the problem was perhaps, you know, Boris Johnson, you know, and the legacy that he left, right? The only problem is, unfortunately, we require from women, you know, more qualities than we require from men, which I think is completely unfair. But I think that, you know, I don't see it as a paradox at all. And I think it's a positive trend that there will be women leaders, both in conservative parties, but also in leftist parties. At the end of the day, as I said, you know, I know many conservative women, many liberal women. The important thing, you know, is to be able to respect each other, you know, and this process of alternation that we were talking, and always respecting the rights of the, you know, women that are in opposition. This is what my take on that. Your question, well, I wrote a paper about that is published in Party Politics, about legacies, how legacies affect, you know, the stability of party systems in Asia. It was even cited in the economies. Legacies clearly have an impact, and this was about Asia. Exactly, the paper was about Asia. So what we saw is that, for example, having an authoritarian legacy is worse than not having an authoritarian legacy. So meaning, you know, a country that, you know, democratized, you know, after a long, you know, dictatorship will make it more difficult for the stability of the party system than, you know, if the country, you know, democratized from a previous, of course, non-democratic, but not authoritarian neither, legacy. And even within the legacies, there are different types. For example, if the legacy was military or personalistic, the stability of the party system will be lower than if you had a party, dictatorship. The mechanism is basically that usually that dictator, the authoritarian party will democratize and will become one of the legs of the party system. Usually the military and the personalistic dictators, they are anti-parties, right? So you have to start from scratch. We also found that, colonial legacies, also very interesting, how colonial legacies can have an impact, on the stability of the party system. But the good news, there is a good news about this, because if I tell you that history determines your future, you will say, well, then I cannot change the past. But the good news of that paper, and that's why I like it, to be fair, I like the finding so much, is that if you manage to consolidate democracy, right? So you manage to not to mess with democracy, not to try to get over the judiciary, not to change the freedom of media, etc., the effect of the legacy fades away. So in those countries where democracy continue, the past, does not determine the future anymore. In those countries where, democracy stop and then democratize and democracy stop, you were mentioning before about this cycle, no? It's basically Huntington's wave of democratization, right? Then, you have to start from scratch and the past comes back to hand you. Understand? So this is a very important thing to take into consideration. So basically, yes, history predetermines your beginnings, but this agency that directs your future. I think this is very important.
Does that answer your question? Yes. Okay, great. Because I thought whether the rise of So I think one of the things that I want to ask each speaker to just give. Oh, great! Yeah, please. Yeah. I think the problem with our political party is because the political party after the reformasi 1999 reformasi still lead by the same old elite. We forgot to cut one generation. Not all elites have the same vision and progressivity like our former president B.J. Habibie. We have the momentum at that time with his vision on democracy and good governance. It helped us a lot to do reform in many aspects. But yeah, we forgot to reform our elites. And the second factor is the shifting from closed list proportional system on our legislative election to open list in 2004 and then fully open list in 2009 in combination with big size of constituency or electoral district are contributed a lot in weakening the ideology of political parties. We can remember that the rise of vote buying started in 2009. We can still control the vote buying in 2004 because it's not fully open list. It's still half open list with the 100% of the quota to fulfill by the candidates. And then by having the combination of open list, big size of electorates, I think that's one of the factor that decrease the ideology, the ideology of the political party. Thank you.
But wouldn't the open party system would democratize the party in a way? Yeah. Instead of closed system? Okay, that's because it's interesting.
No, the thing is that, democracy is like the Goldilocks story. You know the Goldilocks, right? This girl, who lost in the forest, finds the house of the three birds. She tries the cold soup of Mama Bear, she doesn't like it. She tries the hot soup of the Daddy Bear. She doesn't like it. the warm soup is the one that she likes. So the same happens with democracy. Okay, so the solution to democracy is not more democracy, paradoxically. Okay, so what happened, with these reforms is that they weaken political parties. And when political parties are weak, when they feel weak, what do? They basically, become populist. They become open, to things that they are not used to, that they are not their own. It's like if they were a business and they were investing in things that they are not good at. You know what I mean? Just because they're afraid of losing their core constituencies. So what happened with the open list, is that it weakens political parties. This is like mathematics. Divergé already wrote about this in 1954. There are certain mechanical and psychological, rules that determine how. In the United States, Siblak and Levitsky, they have written about this in the famous book How Democracies Die. The democratization of the primaries has led, to the election of Donald Trump. Donald Trump would not be possible in 1973 or 1965, So this is something that, and institutions, have important effects, and this is what, political parties, unfortunately, they don't understand. The same with, big districts, it leads, to this, fragmentation of the party system, to the arising of new political parties that are not institutionalized and also they are not so ideological. It's a mechanical effect. It has been studied so much that sometimes you wonder why politicians do that, but they think that they know better, unfortunately.
Thanks so much. It's a point of confidence, and I like it. I will give 1 minute for you each to just give concluding remarks, and maybe we'll start with Mbak Kanisa.
I think it's important to keep the discussion about democracy in the region alive, whether there's one particular leader or not, because I think the existence of the discussion of democracy is go hand in hand with the discussion of human rights. And I think it's very important to be maintained, because if ASEAN really wants to be a people-centered and people-oriented organization, then one thing that must be fulfilled is the focus on the people itself, and democracy and human rights discussion maintain that. Okay.
Thank you, Mbak. Democracy is a dynamic phenomenon. Yeah, we don't have one standard. We contextualize democracy in each society and country, but democracy is a system of values that need to be safeguarded by the system of laws. In my opinion, what we lost within, I think, 20 years is there's no rule by law, and there's no supremacy of law in safeguarding democracy. That's the first notes. And then the second one is, I still believe that direct presidential system and multi-partyism keep and sustain Indonesian unity. Why? Because from Aceh to Papua, we have common national agenda to elect our president. Because I'm from Sumatra, I can I can experience when we implement the local election to elect regional head and vice head. So we don't have any narrative in Riau about the Riau Merdeka, because we have our political business in our own region to elect our leaders. And then by having the direct presidential election, we also have the national agenda to elect our leaders. So that's why having direct presidentialism and the second one having multi-partyism help us to sustain our unity. Thank you.
If I were to write a paper about Indonesia, I would title it From Bad to Worse. Why? Because when I think about Indonesia in 1999, so basically you in this point, I completely disagree. I still think that presidentialism is, you know, the original sin of Indonesian politics. But you went from parliamentarism to presidentialism. Bad. You know, went from closed list to open list. Bad. You went from high threshold to lower threshold. Bad. You went, you know, from, a bit more public funding to even reduce public funding later to change. So the question is, first of all, you Indonesians not only went from better institutions to worse institutions, you change them all the time, which is horrible. So it is better to have a bad institution constantly than to have institutions changing all the election. Why? Because voters are lost. They don't understand how the system works. So if you have a bad electoral system, at least they know how to go around the bad electoral system. If you change the electoral system all the time, they don't even know how they vote, you know? So keep your institutions for a while, learn about the mistakes, and try after a certain time to fix them. But don't try to fix something without knowing how it really works. So I think, you know, this is something that, you know, is very, very important. There are many, cases in the world. One of them, you know, is Ukraine. Ukraine, again, you know, has changed the electoral system before elections, has changed the powers of the president, you know, has changed, you know, the system of public funding. Look how Ukraine was before the invasion, okay? Let's don't count the invasion. It was a flawed democracy because of institutional instability. Institutions are important, and they are institutions because they require time. In life, everything requires time. So let institutions work and don't change them before knowing that they don't. Thank you very much.
It's the presidential election part is very interesting, but maybe let us try this for a bit and leave. What can we learn from the system?
Already tried this
Okay, not yet. Maybe we need 25 years to see the impact. Okay, so we will have, I think it's been a very good discussions. And one thing, I guess, something that I learned today, look, we all don't like political parties.
I do. If not, I would not be
No, but we have to live with it. So let's work to improve it, I guess, because that's the only, for now, this institution for democracy, right? Whether we like it or not. So thank you so much, and I really hope that, you know, you learn as much as I learned today. I learned a lot about Indonesian election system. So thank you so much, and my apologies if I can't take questions from any one of you here. And let's the discussion going, you know, outside this forum. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Uni Sri Murniati, for moderating the discussions. It's very lively. I'm so glad. Like, it's almost 4:30, and we all still here, and still have a lot to learn. And this democracy is always work on progress, and we strongly believe that democratic values is the best for Indonesia. And I can see like a lot that we can bring the values in ASEAN in a way. Like for now, let's see how ASEAN decision-making process, how democratic it is. So thank you again to Uni, Dr. Bertoa, Ibu Hanisa, and Mbak Titi, very insightful, and to all esteemed audience. Thank you.